Good morning and welcome to the Clearview. I'm Nick Bautista. This week we're talking debt ceiling. So first things first, if you haven't seen it in the news, then you've probably been living under a bit of a rock, right? That's all that's been hitting the headlines, the news waves, the whole talk around the debt ceiling and what's going to happen if the government shuts down. So we want to take a look a little bit about some of the history, where we're at today, and what it could mean for us going forward as they come into the final day to decide and get something passed. So first, let's preface this with Congress, politicians, they're always going to wait until the very final hour to act. To think that there was going to be a deal done anytime before this would be foolish, right? Because they're always going to use bargaining chips, negotiation tools to wait until the very final hour to finally get something passed, which means they're going to give something up or they're going to get something in return. And when we look at the history of the debt ceiling, what does it look like? What does it mean for us as a country? Well, it started back in 1917, where they first set the limit to 11.5 billion. Right? I mean, that's a really long time ago. And they wanted to simplify the process and enhance borrowing flexibility for the U.S., right? And so actually in 1939, they created the first aggregate debt limit that covered all the government debt and set it to 45 billion, which was about 10% above the total debt at the time. So the debt ceiling is temporarily suspended through July of 31 of this year under the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2019. And once the debt ceiling is reinstated, it'll be raised to the current debt level, something like 28.5 trillion, meaning the U.S. government will not be able to issue any new debt above that. And you've probably seen it already, and that's been some of the concern is that Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen had come out and said, hey, the Treasury's going to run out of money, essentially, through what they consider extraordinary measures. They'll probably last until something like October 18th. That was kind of the time deadline that she gave, saying that's when we're basically on borrowed time until then. The U.S. would run out of money, because once we hit that ceiling and exhaust all the available extraordinary measures, we're no longer allowed to issue any new debt, and we'll soon run out after that of cash on hand. So at that point, given annual deficits and income sheets, it'll all be insufficient to pay for the millions of daily obligations as they come due. So the federal government will have to at least temporary default if that happens on many of its obligations, right? From Social Security to salaries for federal civilian employees, military veteran benefits, among other things. So that's why there has been so much coverage around this, and it happens every couple of years because it comes to the deadline and there's all this kind of panic around what's going to happen, and if something shuts down, how will that affect our economy and everyone who's a part of it. And when you look historically at, has this happened before? What does it look like? There hasn't truly been a time where the U.S. defaulted on its debt, meaning we haven't gone past the debt limit or the debt ceiling, and we haven't had the way to pay for everything by suspending or raising the ceiling. There is one instance that happened around 1979. When you look back, some have argued that technically we didn't default. It was a computer issue where the Treasury didn't pay some of the interest on the obligation, and they later came out and made everyone whole. But at that point, the stock market started taking a dive because it was assuming that the Treasury wasn't going to pay on its debt. But they soon cleared it up. Stock market came back, and if you look back at that time frame, you'll see kind of the ups and downs of that. And so that kind of brings us to, hey, where do we stand today? And what do things look like right now? So as today is Thursday, September the 30th, the Democrats are really struggling to get the votes to pass what they need to get passed via the reconciliation, which means they only need the 50 votes, but all the senators in their caucus need to be on the same page. And that's what's really created the friction among the party members, has really been around how much spending how to tie it to infrastructure, the social programs, the climate policy that they've all been discussing and thrown out as part of the policy. And so for their part, the Republicans want to tie the debt ceiling increase to Democrats' legislation so that it would put a spotlight on the party if they can't get it together ahead of the 2022 midterm elections, or they would essentially take the blame if the U.S. defaults. So one of the main people to look at was Joe Manchin, who is the Democrat out of West Virginia. He quote said, "I'm hopeful that common ground can be found that would result in another historic investment in our nation. However, I cannot and will not support trillions in spending or an all or nothing approach that ignores the brutal fiscal reality our nation faces." And so that's been a lot of the friction that they're trying to get him on the same page, him on the same side, so that when it comes to the vote, it'll pass. And a lot of what the Dems want to include in this spend bill includes a lot of what I mentioned: the social programs, universal pre-K, child care, among them some Medicare benefit increases to dental, vision, which means, at the end of the day, there's going to be some tax ramifications to that because they got to pay for all of it. And a lot of the big kind of ideas that have come from this has been the big one being increase on corporations. So the tax rate for corporations, the top tax rate right now is 21%. And in the proposal, they've talked about increasing that to 26.5%, which, if you think back before 2018, the top rate was about 35%, right? So they're trying to inch it higher up so that they can start generating some more revenue. On top of that, the top of the capital gains rate sits at 20% right now. They're talking about increasing that to 25%, which would affect your clients with your investments, depending on when you sell some things, how that would factor into your tax rate when you go to file your taxes for the end of the year. They also want to include a 3.8 Medicare surtax on the high earners to basically jump that capital gains rate to effectively 28.8. So there's definitely going to be some tax ramifications if some of these things come through. The other big one that's been floated out has been getting more resources to the IRS so that they can go out and capture more tax dollars, whether it's through auditing or through collections. Either side of that coin, they want to generate more revenue, and they think there's some real value in doing that to pay for all these things. So what does that mean for us going forward? How does it look as the view from the economy and for the market? Well, in our opinion at Clearview, and in my opinion, it creates some potential buying opportunities. You're going to see a lot of volatility in the market. You're going to see a lot of up and down days. You're going to see a lot of days where the market is up a lot, it's down a lot. And so there's going to be a lot more movement. And that's based off of this uncertainty around what's going to actually happen and what's going to take place. And when the market's moving like that, it's moving off of the uncertainty. So as I've said before, the market doesn't like uncertainty because it doesn't know which direction to go. And so you'll see a lot of that, what we call volatility, a lot of the big ups, a lot of the big downs, which to us mean that if you have cash and you're sitting on the sidelines and you've been afraid and we've been trying to get you to invest, there may be some nice opportunities here to find some of these big down days to get some of that cash working again for some of those long-term goals that we've talked about. If you got some new cash because you're saving up on the month-to-month basis, that might be another opportunity for you to take and use that cash to start getting into the market again, right? We've seen some great gains so far year to date, and for us to find some more through some of these potential buying opportunities could be a really nice win for everyone. So be on the lookout for that. You're going to see a lot more headlines. You're going to see a lot more of this volatility in the market until something gets passed, whether it's, for what you believe should happen, whether you're against what should happen on the policy side. The market essentially doesn't care. It's going to look and see, is there certainty? Does the market understand where this thing's going? And once it gets clarity, it'll probably move based on that. So we feel there's a lot of good opportunity still. And if you're in the camp where you're really worried, you don't know, what's going to happen at the end of the day, reach out to us, give us a call, send us an email. We'd love to talk to you, get into your financial plan and really say, okay, how does this affect your plan? Let's work through the worst case scenario and see how it affects you. Because the last thing we want to do is leave you high and dry, reading the news and feeling really uncomfortable about the road ahead. So we hope that clears up some of what's been going on. We don't feel particularly worried about what's going to happen. We think, again, in our view, something will end up getting passed, as history has shown us. Defaulting on our debt from a U.S. perspective will be extremely, extremely bad. And I think all the politicians in Washington see that. It's just a matter of what the deal is going to look like at the end of the day. But we feel something will end up getting passed, and going forward, things should kind of quiet down here towards the end of the year as we get a clear view. And no pun intended, that's the clear view for this week. We hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments, please let us know. We'd love to talk to you about any of it.